Alright guys, so today's topic's gonna be real simple, not as big a deal as these other ones I've been doing, but I think it's still important, even though it's not necessarily the most important thing you can think about, but still, I want to talk about it. And that is the actual materials or components, whatever you want to call them, I use for fewest moves. Equipment, maybe? So as far as the cubes I use stickerless because I like stickerless. It's just a matter of personal preference. I don't like having to replace stickers, although I believe that, technically if I were to think about it, if I were to truly try to optimize what I use, I'd probably use stickered puzzles, but I just don't want to put that much maintenance into it. It's sort of a trade-off where I'd get a tiny benefit out of it, but not enough to worry about it. So what I currently use, and you'll see sort of what I'm talking about with that as I explain why I use these particular puzzles. I have a Waylong GTS 3M. Got that because it is my favorite puzzle, and it's my main now. This also, the other reason I really like this for fewest moves specifically, I'll get into in a second, and then I use two Valks, and one of them I keep a Valk logo on. So, why do I do this? Well, the GTS 3M has these ridges here, which, I don't know, I barely notice them when I'm actually solving. I don't know if they really do much, but what they do is allow me to distinguish it from my other cubes really easily. So, typically when I'm starting a solve, I will apply the normal scramble to my GTS 3M, the inverse scramble to my non-logo Valk, and then leave the other one solved, and use this one to nis whenever I feel like nissing. And so that way I can really quickly, like if I want to check what something looks like, if I nis, I can just really quickly pick up this cube and do it. And then as the attempt evolves and as I find more stuff and work on specific starts and stuff, these two cubes, my original like normal and inverse cube, they're going to evolve and start, I'm going to do other things to them, but that's how they start. So I know that if I'm near the start of an attempt and I've just set one of these down, I never get confused about which cube has which scramble, or where something is, because I always take this one and I either leave it at like the last thing I wrote on the normal. So if I write on the normal like 4 moves or something, I'm either going to leave it, my GTS 3M with the ridges, I'm either going to leave it in that state so that I know that when I look at it, it's like, okay, obviously I did something to that because it has like a solved block. And I can just go easily look through my notes, find the last thing I did on normal, and just undo it to get back to the normal scramble. Saving yourself from having to scramble your cube can save you a lot of time. So even though it's pretty minor, like using the ridges to distinguish this as my normal cube, allowing me to not have to re-scramble actually saves a significant amount of time. And then similarly, same thing for this inverse cube. I mean, it's not ideal to have two Valks because they aren't as quickly, it's kind of hard to see on camera, I'm sure, but the ridges make it a pretty obvious difference in person for the GTS 3M. So having two Valks isn't ideal necessarily, but I like Valks, and I think having the logo's enough, and usually my nis cube is always solved if I'm not actually like in the process of doing something with it, so it's not too hard to keep track of. So those are the cubes I use and why. I know no one really thinks about that, but I think it's important enough to consider, especially when you're at a somewhat high level. So if you haven't ever thought about what cubes you use for fewest moves, that's my recommendation. Go with just basically 3 cubes, make them as distinct as you can, and still be able to like recognize them and solve them quickly. Insertions. For insertions, at the moment I'm using 2 colors of tape with numbers and letters written on them. So usually and this is just something I started doing very recently. I used to just use 1 color of tape. And then I lost that tape, and they were selling a pack of 2 tapes in different colors at the store when I went there, and I was like, hey, that's a good idea, I should do that. So now I use one of them for numbers, one for letters, and I put numbers on corners, letters on edges. It allows me to, like, if I'm doing something like a 3 edges, 3 corners skeleton, I can really quickly distinguish between them and just figure out the best way to solve it just by sort of filtering out colors. So if I want to just go through my skeleton and really quickly try to find an edge insertion, I'll just look at the red stickers. If I want to find a corner insertion, I'll look at the yellow stickers. And yeah, that's a pretty good system for me. So the one thing I'll say about insertion stickers is it doesn't really matter what you use for them too much. I really like this 2-tape system, but it's not super important. But definitely you should have your stickers written or whatever before the attempt. Like, you don't want to be writing on tape or writing on stickers during the attempt. It's a time waster, and it's not an insignificant amount of time because you've got to like switch pens, or like sometimes your pen won't work super well on the sticker or whatever. It's just, you should always have your stickers pre-written. So if you know anyone or talk to anyone who's ever been to an FMC comp with me, you would know that I write a ton of stickers before every attempt, and every once in a while I still don't have enough, and have to like write some during the attempt, and that's really annoying and wastes time. Again, this is all nitpicky stuff that, to a certain extent, like won't matter on most solves. Like the vast majority of my solves, this doesn't make a difference, but there are those solves that come down to like the last 2 seconds, so saving yourselves like 2 or 3 seconds by doing these simple things is worth it for those cases, and even if it's rare, sometimes it'll come in handy. Pens I use, this is definitely not as important, I just, personal preference, I really like this Pilot G2, and I use Sharpies for writing on insertion stickers. That's about it. That's about all I can think of as far as the equipment I use. I like to have a water bottle with me when I'm solving, in case I get thirsty. But yeah, that's about it. So, thanks for watching. Hopefully, I don't know if you really learned something necessarily, but at least maybe gave you something to think about that you hadn't thought about before. And I'll see you tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow? I don't know if I'm doing these every day, but I have so far, so tomorrow? Maybe?